we're going to talk about how to find the angle between two vectors. We already know how to find the positive angle between the x-axis or the positive horizontal axis and a vector in the plane, but now we're going to find how to find the angle between two vectors in the plane. So we're going to let u and b be vectors and sketch them with their initial points at the origin. Here's u, here's v, their initial points are at the origin. And we define the angle theta between these two vectors to be the smaller of the angles formed by the representations of u and v. So theta is this smaller angle. Now there's a second angle, this bigger angle, with the dotted line here. But the theta we're talking about is the smaller angle between the two vectors. So theta will lie between 0 and pi. And we can find this angle using the dot product. Here is another definition for the dot product. We know how to find the dot product. It is the product of the horizontal components plus the product of the vertical components. So theta is an angle between two non-zero vectors, u and v. Then the dot product of those two vectors, u dot v, equals the magnitude of u times the magnitude of v times the cosine of that angle between them, theta. So the dot product theorem allows us to find the angle between two vectors simply if we know the components of each vector. So we'll use some algebra on this and solve it for cosine of theta. So to find theta, the cosine of theta is u dot v over the product of their magnitudes. So therefore theta would be the cosine inverse of this fraction. And that's how we're going to find the angle between two vectors. So let's work a couple of examples. So find the angle between vectors u, 2, 5, and v, 4, negative 3. So we're going to use this formula for the angle between two vectors. First we find their dot product, that is the product of their horizontal components plus the product of their vertical components. That equals negative 7. And then we multiply the magnitudes, the magnitude of u times the magnitude of v. So we have the cosine of theta is this ratio. Therefore, theta is the cosine inverse of this ratio. Again, this is something that we will do. All of our vector work is done in degree mode. And so angle theta is 105.1 degrees. So pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of knowing this formula in order for us to find the angle between two vectors. Now there's something about when that angle is 90 degrees or pi over 2. So two non-zero vectors u and v are perpendicular, and in this context perpendicular is called orthogonal. So if you're asked to find whether two vectors are orthogonal, it's asking you, are these two vectors perpendicular to one another in the plane? So the following theorem shows that we can determine whether two vectors are orthogonal by finding their dot product. If their dot product is 0, then those two vectors are perpendicular. They are orthogonal to one another. So we'll work another couple of examples. Here, example A, given u is 3, 5 and v is 2, negative 8, we're going to determine if they are perpendicular or orthogonal to one another. So we find the dot product. The dot product is not 0, so they are not perpendicular. On B, u is 2, 1 and v is negative 1, 2. Their dot product is 0. Therefore, we know that vector u and vector v are perpendicular to one another or are orthogonal to one another. So that's it. Simple, short, sweet little video. Come to class next time and we'll work some examples of how to find the angle between two vectors and how to determine whether vectors are orthogonal to one another.